all across space, all across time. Mysteries that we can't understand.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the SA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
Looking into the stories and those behind them. Welcome to UAP Insight Podcast. Hey everybody, got a very special episode for you today. I am speaking with Jason Sands, former Air Force veteran and first-hand whistleblower. He was actually in the program back in the late or early 90s, I believe. So without any further ado, I'll let him introduce himself and hope you guys enjoy. Let's get started. All right, how you doing today, Jason?
Hi, thank you for inviting me. I'm doing great.
Absolutely. You look like you're kind of improving your health a little bit.
Yep, been working out, trying to lift some weights, get back in shape.
Well, you definitely look like you could kick a gorilla's ass.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I used to be
Abs-
I was actually bigger than this when I was younger. So,
yeah, I can definitely tell you have some muscle mass hidden in there.
yeah. Well, under a layer of fat.
Well, that's okay. That just keeps you warm in the winter, right?
Yeah, padding. Yes, correct.
Yeah. So, let's tell everyone a little bit about yourself for those who might not be familiar with you.
Yeah, I'm a 22-year veteran from the Air Force. I retired in 2007. I had about 3 years of my career working in the program, the UAP program, reverse engineering. And then I served as a DoD contractor after that. I'm also the father of 6 beautiful children. They're all adults now. I've got 4 grandkids. They're all beautiful. I still have my beautiful wife. We're separated right now, unfortunately, but I still do love her, and we do get along as friends. So that's me in a nutshell. But I grew up in, I should mention where I've been, Army brat, so I got pushed around everywhere. Um, we got Japan. I was born in England. Then Japan, we went there. Then we went to Germany, or excuse me, Fort Devens, Massachusetts. Then we went to California, then Germany, Augsburg, Germany, back to Fort Devens. And then in my adult life, I went back around a lot of those same places. So it's pretty much the same thing. I had very similar military as my dad, so we ended up in a lot of the same locations.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how a lot of people involved with UAP that are military have kind of an origin story in Europe or European Union, like in the UK.
Yes.
Because I know Lenville Logan, who I had on for my first episode, was also born in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah,
he was born like just right outside Sherwood Forest, Robin Hood, all that stuff.
yeah, I remember him telling me a bit about that. So yeah, it's kind of cool when we kind of met. We kind of agreed on that point where we were both born in England, so it made us better than everybody else.
You're not
Just
wrong
kidding.
there.
No, just kidding.
But so take me through kind of your younger years in a nutshell. I understand that you had kind of a rough childhood just due to things that happened between you and your father.
Yeah, it was mainly stemmed from my dad's kind of rough upbringing. He was an orphan as a kid, had to fight for even a bar of soap to wash himself, and the other big kids would beat him up, stuff like that. So he learned to fight at a very early age, and then when he got into high school, he started drinking, and unfortunately, he carried those behaviors into the marriage with him when I was born and my sister was born. So yeah, we had a pretty rough beginning, and it kept getting worse and worse until we ended up in Germany, Augsburg, Germany, and that's where things reached a crescendo. And my mother and him got a divorce. I stayed with him, and I knew he needed me. It wasn't out. I wasn't doing it to hurt anybody. I did it because I cared for him. So I had some compassion there for that, and I think I've mentioned that as well with the Julian Dory show, that I mentioned the same thing. But yeah, he claims that because I was around and I loved him through all that 10 years of my living with him, that he finally came around, and he said that I was a big part of that because I just stuck by him, stuck by his side. So
Yeah.
that was a big deal. But yeah, those were terrible years at the beginning. There were some good times too, I have to say. We did go out and do some camping and fishing. We did some other things where violence and drinking wasn't involved with him, because really he was a very good guy, great soldier when he didn't have a bottle in his hand. So at least he got it was just the alcohol made him a nasty person. So anyway, we get through all that. Like I said, after that divorce, that's when my mother went back to California to be near her sister. I ended up living with her for a little bit as well after I graduated high school. Um, and that was kind of good. And that was when I also joined the Air Force. So I did that. I got in the Air Force to mainly prove to myself that um, I could do it, and I wanted to complete my commitment. Ended up doing 22 years, so I'm very proud of that. Retired at the age of 42, and I had all my medical benefits, had my degree, all that stuff. So I look back on that as being a really good blessing. You can't retire from literally anywhere else at that age with all those benefits. I don't think there's a single company out there that offers that much. Um, but anyway, yeah, I met my wife in the military after I was entered into the program, or the UAP program. I met my wife, had my children there at Nellis Air Force Base. And my first job actually was fixing airplanes. I was an airframe repair specialist. So I used to fix broken wings and gear tracks and what have you. And then I went into intel work, and that's when I met my wife. Um, so that's kind of how it went in my childhood. But yeah, it was kind of violent. It had some good spots. Moved around a whole lot, about every 3 years, I think, on average. So it was a lot of moving around and changing friends out. But I also have a lot of lifelong friends that have still been with me ever since.
Well, that's really good to hear that you have some friends that have always been there for you. I too can kind of connect with you on the having a alcoholic father. I dealt with that all the way up until after I moved out at 18,
Mm.
and it wasn't until after we had a hard wake up call for him that he was able to kind of back off and reevaluate, and he had actually moved back to California, which is where we were originally from, um,
Mm.
and kind of turned his life around. And the last couple of years of his life, he was just a much better person. And
Yeah, I should have said that about my dad too, because when he did turn his life around, he became the dad, the father, the husband. He became the person he was supposed to be, and I was very
yeah,
happy. I'm very When he passed away, I was very proud of him and how far along he came.
yeah, I understand that feeling. So, what would you say is your favorite memory that you had with him growing up?
Well, I'd say it was the fishing trips that we went on. when it was just he and I in Germany. He would take me every weekend after the first few months, and I think he finally realized that, we could go camping and do fun stuff that, and we did. And we did that for at least another year or so. And yeah, we caught a lot of fish, had a lot of talks. So that was probably my fondest memory of him, are those years when he was calming down after the marriage and getting his life straight. Yeah, that meant a lot to me to see him, start to calm down a bit, at least around me. And the violence stopped, and he did come home drunk sometimes, but it was not like it was before. Um, you could tell it was definitely my wife, or his wife and him, or my mother and him, both were the ones that kind of catalyzed each other. You know how it kind of goes. Sometimes you get, a stubborn couple of people. That's kind of how it was all the time.
Yeah, just like a match in gunpowder.
Yeah,
Just not a great match.
yeah. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how it was. But yeah, that's that. So once that dynamic left, then yeah, everything kind of calmed down. Hopefully, the same thing happened to you.
It my luckily my dad and my mom weren't always butting heads. It was more of a my mom just calmly had enough at one point and just said she was done, it's over, and walked away, which I commend her for doing because it not only saved it from escalating, but just kind of helped wake him up
Yeah,
to what he was doing. And
yeah, that has to happen sometimes.
yeah. So when you moved in with your mom,
Yeah.
what would you say was your fondest memory for those years that you were living with her?
Just the fact that we didn't have much, but we still had lots of fun. I mean, it was always going to Alum Park and walking the trails, um, just doing sightseeing things, going on long walks, playing with my friends. Um, yeah, it was just a really good time. It was good. And by the way, that's where I saw my first UFO too. So, um,
Oh, tell me about that.
yeah, well, the UFO incident, my dad just happened to be home because he wasn't there the whole time. He actually went to Vietnam um, for a good portion of it. But anyway, he came home, so it was around holiday season, either Thanksgiving or Christmas or somewhere in between. And anyway, so all the adults were hanging out in the living room, and I'm getting sleepy, so I'm thinking I'm going to go to bed. I walk in my bedroom, the lights are all turned out, and I'm looking out my window, and I can see this red orb kind of dropping from the sky a good distance away. But it was so bright that it really, caught my eye. I mean, you're talking about it's dark and I can see all the stars, but this was like, you know, almost as bright as another moon. So I'm watching it and it's coming straight towards me and where I live because I lived on the side of a hill that kind of gently sloped down and then it went up. Well, it went down. I'm about halfway up the hill where I live. It continues on down, and then there's a little uh, dip in like a little valley, and then it goes up to another hill across the street where a ranch is. Um, and that's where this orb is coming straight towards us, this ranch on the top of the hill. That's just, I can see on the other side of the road at the bottom of my hill. So as it's coming down, it's getting bigger and bigger. By the time it gets near the ranch, it's lighting up everything around it, with this red glow that was coming off of it. And then it continued to come even closer until the point where at the bottom of my street, that's where my friend Eddie lived. Uh, it started coming straight towards Eddie's house. And that's when there's this huge flash of light. It was like a flash bulb going off. And it was so bright I had to kind of blink. And then when I opened my eyes, there's this like little silver disc. Looked like just somebody, if you could imagine having a plate where you drop some mercury in it and it's kind of round on the top but flat on the bottom. That's what it looked like without any rivets. And then it starts to move very slowly over the top of the roof line of my friend Eddie's house. And by this time, I'm freaking out. So I'm screaming, UFO, UFO. I can hear the adults in the living room. And I go running towards the hallway closet to go get my dad's binoculars because I'm like, I'm getting a good look at this. And the only person who responded was my mother. The rest of the people thought, oh, he's just, doing whatever. He's crazy, whatever. Or they didn't even hear me. I don't know. But anyway, my mother follows me out to the front lawn. And as this craft is coming out over the rooftop, it's going towards Eddie's driveway and the street. And there's a street light there at the end of his driveway because he's on the corner house at the bottom of the street. And this UFO just floats right in front of this light. And my mom and I are both standing there on the front lawn looking at this thing. And then it takes off like a shot into the sky. Looks like it's a white dot. And then it stops around this other white dot. They both look like stars. And the one that I saw and had stopped just remains there. And this other one just takes off like a shot across the horizon. And I can't even keep up with my eyeball. I had to kind of see it through my peripheral vision, but it was just straight as a laser across the mountaintops all the way as far as the eye could see. And if you're familiar with California, San Jose area has got a lot of, foothills and mountains and things like that. And that's what it just went from one end of the horizon to the other.
Wow, that's kind of wild.
Yeah. And I talked to my friend Eddie about it too. I think that following Monday when we got on the school bus and I told him about it, he felt like, or he told me that he had his lights were going on and off that night and his television went weird. He wasn't receiving things properly. And he said he heard a hum outside, but he was too scared to go out there. He didn't know what it was. But when I told him, he was like, oh, shoot, I want to see aliens, So he felt bad.
Yeah. So when you were witnessing this craft just slowly moving, was it just moving steadily or was it kind of wobbling a little bit or?
Very steady. I didn't see any wobbling whatsoever. Yeah, it was a very steady advancement to its driveway and then straight up into the sky, no wobbling before or after.
Okay. And after you had seen it, did you have anything happen later that night or that weekend, such as like weird dreams or odd smells, animals acting weird, anything like that?
Well, yeah, my dog Snoopy, she remained calm. I think through the whole thing, she always used to like to sleep on my bed because I was her favorite human, I guess. So she was okay, but I do remember having thought pretty deeply after that experience about other life and what does that mean. So yeah, I did have some strange dreams that I attributed to the fact that I had seen something weird. But yeah, the dreams were very vivid. And yeah, there were alien looking beings in those dreams. So yeah, I did have some weird dreams after that.
Okay. Um, I guess my follow-up on that would be, is there any connections between the dreams that you had, like the vividity of them from those nights to like your later encounters?
Um, no, I'd say that they were all kind of individual events. The only time that there was a connection was either the feeling of telepathy on a couple of them, and that in or two instances where my mother was involved, that some Nordic looking aliens might have shown up twice in my life. But they were the same individuals both times. And my mom can attest to that. So she was the one actually answering the door when they came knocking. But they always seemed to be protective. They always seemed to be concerned for us. And it was always in a time when we were having a rough time.
So, okay. I guess since you have described like the feeling of telepathy, how would you best describe that to someone who's never experienced that?
Well, it's on an almost, well, I would say it's an emotional level. It's like, the meaning of the word rather than the word itself. Just like when I'm talking to you, I'm attaching the meaning to the words that I want to relay. Likewise, when you receive it, the same thing's happening. You're receiving it very quickly, and you understand the meaning of it, and it files it away almost on a emotional level that is much quicker than how fast I can speak. So you don't even detect how quickly your mind is picking up on the understanding of each word. So um, in my experience, that telepathy was kind of like that because the individual in the desert, that encounter, that did have a vocal or oral component. So he was speaking, but I didn't understand the language. However, the reason the reason I think I understood that was because on a telepathic level, I was listening to his meanings of the words, and they were just like the meanings of the words that you and I use, but devoid of having to deal with this language barrier. It was more mentally, you and I understood each other mentally, and the oral part of it was really not needed. If you could imagine telepathy being like that, then you kind of get the first idea of it. The second idea is there was I don't know, I guess a sharing of consciousness between me and him. And part of him rubbed off on me, and part of me rubbed off on him. And it actually changed me the rest of my life because I felt the peace, the love that he had, the respect. All of that was very much something that impacted my life. Because I think a lot of times when we're thinking we have a lot of things going on in our mind, we're very distracted. His was very focused, and I could tell he was controlled. So that's another part of the telepathy, is that when you run into these beings, um, their mental and cognitive state is much more focused, because if you can imagine that your major communication in your life is mainly telepathic, even as an infant, you and I would learn to control our thoughts, you know, because you wouldn't want your parents hearing you curse mentally to them and things like this. So instead of audibly, using the F-bomb to your parents, you've had to learn the same etiquette in your brain because your parents can hear what's going on in your head. So, if you can imagine that at such an early age in life that you're having to learn everything we do with proper etiquette and speaking, you're doing the same thing mentally for them in their lives, because they're telepathic, and that's why they have to control their thoughts. And I think that's why he was so laser focused on me, because he knows how to keep his mind quiet. Whereas me, I was noisy. I was feeling fearful at times. My mind was all over the freaking place. I definitely felt kind of embarrassed by the way my mind was a freaking mess compared to his. Um, so that's the way I would describe the telepathy, is that it's a very natural feeling thing as well. I could tell you that there was no headache, no dizziness, no nothing. It felt very natural to me. It felt like I'd been doing it all my life. So that's
Did
another
it
thing.
did it feel almost more natural than speaking in a normal way?
Yeah, because there's no mistaking the words at all, because I know what I'm trying to tell you. Even if a word has two meanings, you know, um, you'd know what I was thinking. Which version of that word am I thinking about? When I say it's cool, am I talking about temperature, or am I talking about how cool you are, or are we talking about we're cool about something we just talked about? we have all these meanings for that one word. But if you could imagine, it's much more efficient to have the ability to just think it, and everybody just know what you're saying. So yeah, it's more efficient. It's natural. Um, the only thing that was kind of confusing was the fact that at one point he got upset because I mentioned, wanted to go get your material from, Dreamland, and he was very disgusted with that. And when that wave of disgust hit me, it felt like I was being disgusted about something, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm not disgusted about anything. It has to be coming from him. But it felt like me, like my emotion, like I had generated that emotion myself. So you've got to have a little bit of awareness of who you are when it comes to telepathy. Um, so you understand what is going on, so you don't confuse your emotions with theirs, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Um, so let's get back on track with your story. So you have just enlisted in the Air Force. I imagine this probably would have been late
85.
80s or so.
Yeah, 85.
Okay, so 1985, you've enlisted in the Air Force. You're airframe mechanic. Um, what are some of the planes that you're working on mainly?
Well, the planes I'm working on are the C-130s, the large-bodied aircraft, the KC-135s that do air refueling. So these are the ones that are about the size of a Boeing aircraft. Um, and that's what I specialized in. There are other, and I did fix some Huey helicopters, but not a lot. And it just depends on what base you go to as an airframe repair guy, what kind of aircraft, because there's other people that I worked with that had worked on F-15s and F-16s, and now they're working on, the large body cargo type aircraft. But that's all I did there. And I only worked there for 3 years before I cross-trained into being an intel guy.
Okay. And how do you reach the point where you start the cross training process? Like, what is
Well,
the trigger for that?
the trigger was sometimes there are too many, they hire too many people into a particular career field, or they don't need as many because they're retiring a certain kind of aircraft. And that's kind of what was going on with me, is they were retiring some aircraft, then they were downsizing the number of airframe repair people. And usually the lowest ranking people are the ones to go first. And I only had, like a few stripes on me in rank. So I had to go to the career counselor and ask him, what other jobs are available. And they showed me a list, and I picked from those and took the tests, and ended up I was good at doing some intel work. So I said, okay, sounds cool. And that's how it happens. It's just that, I was in a situation where the Air Force didn't need as many people in my career field.
Okay. So take me to your first month as an intel guy. Kind of what are your assignments that you're doing?
As an intel guy, my first base was to go to Sembach, Germany. I'm monitoring telephones. It's called telecommunications monitoring assessment. Um, and I think in the early days it was called electronic systems security or something like that. But really all it meant was you're tapping phones, you're listening to radios, whatever other telecommunications means, you're listening to satellites, all that good stuff. And you're doing it for base commanders and their staff. And what they are asking me and my team to do is to come out and make sure that the communications are as secure as possible, that they're using their equipment properly, and that we're not able to figure out the missions and stuff and endanger people that might be deploying. So we were listening for all those things, and then we would report on that after and usually it was a 2-week mission. And then on the last Friday, we would do a quick briefing to the staff. And then later on, after 90 days transpired, we'd give the final report. And that was how we ended up. so that everybody had a final report with all the details that we didn't have time to report on during that Friday hot wash kind of a down and dirty briefing. So there was 2 reporting periods that were there, the quick down and dirty, and then the one that came 90 days later. And that's how we did it. And everything that we did, I think we were able to do a really good job. We helped button down a lot of the different installations and organizations and stuff like that. And we helped, them to understand what they needed to train their folks to do to keep everything operationally secure, so that they could get people deployed without giving away what day and where they're going and all that other good stuff.
Okay, so while you're doing these listening jobs, or wiretaps, whatever you want to call them, I imagine you probably overheard some pretty interesting things.
Yeah.
What would you say is kind of the funniest thing that you listened into that you're able to share?
Um, I think it was a husband and a wife, and the guy had diarrhea. And I don't want to get into it, but it turned out to be hilarious. Um, but those kind of conversations are just things that we delete. After, we don't even bother keeping them. We were only there to do the operations. But yeah, sometimes you'd listen to these calls and you'd be like, "Oh my gosh," I also felt a bit like after doing that for a number of years, I was like, "Good grief, I don't want to do this job anymore," because I'm also seeing the dark side of people. I mean, we were also listening in on some very horrible things that people did to each other, and husbands and wives were getting divorces and all these other things that just heartbreaking. The kids and things like this and what's happening to the kids. It just was heartbreaking. So at a certain point, it's kind of like being a cop at doing that job, where you just see too much of the dark side of human beings and you just need a break from it.
Yeah, just getting burnt out.
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, there was some funny stuff that happened in between, and we did save a couple of people from getting hurt because uh, we had to call the cops to stop somebody from harming another person at one point because he called the phone, and we just happened to be monitoring at the time, and the guy's like, I'm going to come kill you, you mother, and luckily we acted on that in a timely manner, and they stopped it. So
Well,
good.
that's a good thing to do, is
Mm-hmm.
stop that. So how long were you doing that as a career for the call monitoring, before you were introduced to the program that you were in?
It happened pretty quickly, getting called into the program, but I did do the frontline analyst kind of work for about 3 years, I believe, and then I got stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, or excuse me, 2 years, and then a few months into my next assignment at Nellis Air Force Base, that's when I got into the program. So about 2 years, maybe 3 to 6 months, I was doing the telecommunications purely as a career field thing, and then I got introduced to the program where I did another version of that, but I couldn't tell anybody where I went, and we would also deploy with OSI agents, and they would do the red teaming on the that's what they called it, red teaming, but they would try to do the physical security side of things, like faking ID cards and trying to get in to facilities that they shouldn't be into, to do the security assessment and see how smart people were about their security. So it was a more robust thing for the program. But I kind of did it by night. They'd just call me on a Friday and say, "Hey, meet us at McCarran Airport. We're taking off tomorrow. We'll tell you where we're going on the way." So that's how I operated with the special access program. The other missions, the other people, they had no idea I was even doing it, and the other 3 guys, for that matter, because we had an officer that was also assigned to the team, who was also kind of a subject matter expert for scientific stuff that we couldn't understand. Because sometimes you'd hear technical calls, and we'd need him to come help us out when we're reporting on it. But he was also being the guy that gave us top cover, so that if anybody asked, hey, where did Jason go? He'd be there to be the one to say, hey, leave him alone. He's working with me, just, on something. And he would brush them off, in other words, so that nobody would ask any more questions about where I was. And that's kind of how we ran the missions. It's just you get a call on a Friday, take off in the morning, you're gone, come back 2 weeks later, act like nothing happened, and how it went.
Yeah. So take me to the day when you got brought into the program. How did that day kind of play out for you? Was it just like a, hey, we need you to do this, and now, you're just getting right into this with no warning, or were you slowly introduced?
It was a bit of a slow introduction. I didn't know it at the time, but I knew that they had after I was invited to be part of the team, that the other three guys had already been out and deployed with them a number of times, and they were actually watching me, and I guess they liked me, and they liked my analytical capabilities and my memory for things, and being able to link data together, things like this. So when the day it happened, that one of them came to me and just said, we'd like for you to join us. We're part of a special team, and you'd have to take a polygraph. Are you interested? They're going to dig it. We're going to dig up all kinds of stuff on your family and everything else. Are you willing to go through the process? And I'm like, yeah, I could do that. I got nothing to hide. So I also realized how much gravity there was to it if I was going to take a polygraph test and all that stuff to be part of the program. And then they also told me that I'd be going to Dreamland. And I'm like, oh, great, cool. So we actually got on the planes within a short amount of time after I got my polygraph. And we met the base commander. And that was fun that day. I got to run around the base, get to see it for myself.
Okay, so what security clearance level did you have at that point?
It's you start off with the top secret compartmented uh, information level type clearance, or TSSCI is what they call it for short. And that's just the entry level. So that all that means is you've had your life looked into, your criminal record looked into, literally everything that you would expect from somebody who's been given a position of, secrecy. So that's all that does. Then there's all these little caveats that you can have along with that allow you to get into certain types of reporting that intelligence reports, because they all come out from different systems and different sources that are also classified. So you have to get read in to those certain things. And then there's a whole nother layer of what we call special access programs. And in those, you've got unacknowledged special access programs, or SAPs, and you've got acknowledged types of SAPs. And all that means is that an unacknowledged one is that if you ever get caught with this particular system, or you talk about certain keywords and things like this within that program, then you could end up in a bad way, because it's classified. And really all it is just mostly what the classified part is, either the weapon system and what it does, or who it targets. And that's kind of all it is just, it's usually around a weapon system or some kind of a research for a weapon system. And that's what I was getting into. So those are the two types, though: unacknowledged and acknowledged. And an acknowledged one is one that, everybody kind of knows about the system, or they know about the program. However, they don't get to know the daily details or know how it works on the inside. But we will say, yeah, that's our bomb, or this is what we're doing in this program, but you can't know all the particulars. And so it's kind of a little little bit more secure or unsecure than an unacknowledged one. But you very rarely talk about it, even so, because it is still a special access program that is held above top secret. And then you can get right into a ton of those. And the only one that is even more clandestine is the waivered, unacknowledged SAP programs. And that's what this program is. Waivered simply means there is no congressional oversight, or very
Okay.
little, or very little.
Okay. And I guess kind of walk me through the process of getting read onto a new program. For I know a lot of people don't know the actual process of getting read into something. So what can you share about that process?
Well, usually there is a lead on site that will do the paperwork once you're introduced to the program. But no paperwork is taking place up until that point. Then once you're actually read in, you have to go and see the video, as they say, where you're shown this is the project that you're a part of. These are the things we do. This is what must be kept secret. Blah blah blah. And it's like a movie. It's like a really bad 1980s movie uh, of the program. So that's how you get introduced to that, and then you get introduced to your workshop or your office formally, and you become part of that, and off you go, and you start doing your job.
Okay. And um, during the process of being read in, is are you able to speak with your superior officer on being read into any specifics of a program? Or is that something that only you are allowed to know because you are the one being read in?
Um, Usually, if you're working in one office, everybody's kind of read in. There might be a couple of things that you can't know about, but you can know most of it. Usually, the commander or your supervisor would also be read into whatever you're read into. And that's kind of how it rolls out. Now, compartmentalization is another aspect of that. Excuse me. Man, I really got a bad throat today. But anyway, so the compartmentalization is another aspect of it to where, yeah, there's some people that are not read into certain levels of this or that. So depending on your job, like if you're a scientist, you may be only given, all right, this is your job. You've got to reverse engineer this engine nacelle for us and figure out how it works. Okay. That's your only thing you're given. You don't know what the guy down the hall does. You don't know what the commander's up to. You don't know anything else. You just know that you got to figure out this one engine. So for me and my team, we couldn't put up with all the different read-ins all over the place. So we were read in at what they call the umbrella level, which means you can know all the things underneath. So we could go anywhere we wanted to, and we wouldn't have to go out and get a read in on any particular thing, and we could go in and do our monitoring on the telephones and on the whatever else we had to do, the radios or whatever. And all those things are part of that as well. So the compartmentalization is a little bit of something that people need to get a little bit smarter on as well. And that's, like I explained to you there, is that even inside a special access program, even if I'm read in at that umbrella level, the other aspect of it is that I may not know the exact details of everything that's going on below it, unless I have a need to know. Okay. And what that means is your need to know is that you have a mission reason to want to know the information about what this person is doing. And obviously, for my job, I had a need to know because the commanders at all these different locations needed to know if there were any intelligence leaks coming out of their locations. So I had to be able to operate at that level all the time. So my need to know was pretty high on everything.
Okay. So during the late 80s, after you've enlisted, you're about 4 years in, put it about 1989. Are you in the program at that point?
89, no. In 1991, I was introduced, and then I left the program in 1994. So
Okay, so take me to 1991. We've got Desert Shield, Desert Storm going on in Iraq. Where are you at this point? Are you still back at Nellis, or are you
I'm at
taking part?
Nellis.
Okay.
Well, but I'm at Nellis, but I went to CENTCOM, deployed to CENTCOM for quite a long time, and reported to CENTCOM on all the things that they were doing down there at headquarters.
Okay. And then during the program, how did you start to realize that, oh shit, there's non-human intelligence in play here? Was that just known to you from the beginning, or was that something that you gathered through all of your listening
I
post
wanted to know
activities?
more about it, but I didn't know about it. Again, there's always that doubt in your mind until you experience it for yourself. So at the onset, I had only had my UFO experience and a couple other weird things that had happened up until that point when I entered into this program. So once I was in the program, now I started hearing things that I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck is this? And they just mentioned another species of beings, you know. So I was a bit shocked. All the guys that I worked with were shocked as well. And they and I talked a little bit about it, but we didn't have a lot of time to do so because we're always on mission. And then when we went back home, we kind of went and did our own thing. We went back to our own life. Um, so uh, when it came down to me parsing what I had listened to and my experiences, and then all that adding up, it really jarred it really shook me up when it came to my faith, what I thought I knew about the Bible. But then I came to grips with it, and I started realizing, no, the Bible actually mentions all these other beings and living beings out there. There was the cherubim, the seraphim, and I kept listing it all out in my head. And I'm like, yeah, we're not the only thing God created. So my faith, I settled in on my faith, and then also my mind on the other side, the secular side of my mind was like, yeah, it seems correct. I started thinking about ancient history, eyewitness, reports that go all the way back even millennia, that other people are reporting on UFOs and all this good stuff. So yeah, there was it was kind of like a little revelation time for me, and it left my head kind of spinning for probably a good year, not knowing what to think one way or the other. So yeah, that's kind of how it went with me anyway.
So during that year where you're struggling, or working on coming to grips with all of the facts that have been presented to you, is there anybody at all that you're able to kind of talk with and help you, just essentially just be a whiteboard for you to put your ideas on?
The only time I felt that way is when I was in giving my testimony to the Congress, to Arrow, and to the ICIG. That was the only time when I was in a skiff where I felt comfortable talking about some of that. But even they didn't hear everything because they
So
were they're investigating and they didn't need to know all this other golly gee whiz stuff. I mean, yeah, great. I had an encounter in the desert. Does that help them with their investigation? Well, no. Uh, but having names and locations can be, and that's what I handed them.
okay, so during your time in the skiff, how do you get from just being a private citizen at that point to going to the ICIG Aero congressional offices and testifying?
At that time, it was 2022. I was on the UAP Task Force Forum, which is on the Top Secret Network. And that's where all the analysts and scientists and everybody was, taking all of the imagery in and the reporting on UAPs. and the only qualification you needed was to be able to, you could join the forum, but if you wanted to contribute, you had to have a real reason to be there. I was lucky enough to be, involved in Black programs, and I got to make some comments. And that's where the UAP task force got in contact with me because they saw what I had posted. And that was when the UFO incident at Nellis, I told them, or excuse me, somebody else brought in a report on the UFO at Nellis in 1994. And I saw the video and I'm like, I know about this. I was there, So I posted on that blog or that forum about my encounter a few weeks later because I was kind of like, do I do it? Do I not do it? So I finally did it. And that's when the UAP task force contacted me. So it was a little bit of a process for me. And then that's when I got introduced to David Grush. He did the interview with me. He vetted me. He checked on my clearances and all this other good stuff. He found out I had all the tickets that, that were in the system. And he was like, yep, he's legit. So it was kind of David, I think, that also kept, asking me questions as we went along. But then later on, I got a call, and the Congress said they wanted me to come in. So there'd been some, discussion just prior to that, but this was October of 2022. I get a call from one of the committee members, and they asked if I would come in and testify. And I said yes. So by December, I had given my testimony, and that's when things rolled into it. And then the following month in January, they asked me to go give a testimony to Arrow. So I gave testimony to Arrow. Then I was told that it was a good idea to file an official ICIG complaint. So I did that as a legal thing also, because each one of these is a layer of protection for a whistleblower. And anyway, and then the last thing was to do my pre-publication, which is if I'm going to go public, which I am, I had to list out what I want to talk about. So I got all that approved, and by that time it was the 20th of March. I think it was the month of March. I finally got my pre-publication completed, and I think that's when I was ready to go public. But that was kind of another process in itself.
Okay, so as you're testifying to Congress and to Arrow, how are you being treated? Are you being treated with respect, or does it kind of feel like they're just blowing your story off?
At the moment, yeah, it felt like everybody took it seriously. They took notes, and they did look into things. I know with the ICIG, initially I was a bit upset that they didn't consider my account as being urgent, but then I had to realize that David Grush had already talked to them, and that my whistleblowing was rolled up in his whistleblowing because he was using information from what I told him amongst all these other whistleblowers that he presented to them. So yeah, he was considered urgent. Mine not so much, because I think they've got finite resources, and they can't just go out and have a team investigating for me, investigating for David, and all the other 40 whistleblowers that came forward. It would just be too resource intense. And so it's better just to call David's report as being the one that kind of warehouses all the other reports, and then investigate from there.
Okay, so did you ever have the opportunity to meet with any of the other whistleblowers that were part of David Grush?
No, I only had other whistleblowers come forward to me, and I helped them out. Those are the only ones I know, other than David and a couple
Okay,
other. And then later on, I got introduced to a few more, but yeah, I only know a handful of them.
okay. Any names that are public?
Yes, yep,
Are you able to share those with us?
yeah, Louis Elizondo. Yeah,
Okay, so Lou Elizondo, how did you come about meeting him?
that was really early on, actually. and that was when Lenval Logan, the guy that was with me on Joe Rogan, he actually knew Lou, and he asked if I wanted to meet him. And I said, yeah, he's a hero of mine. Yeah, I'd love to do that. And so Lou called me up, and we had a good conversation, got to know him. He listened to my story, and so we've kind of known each other for about since 2022, I guess.
Okay. So you said you were on Logan, or not on Logan, on Rogan. Um, so I wanted to kind of speak with you about a little segment that was on there when you and Lenville were talking about your mutual friend and the Dover Demon and that. Would you like to tell people who you were talking about?
Well, the Dover Demon thing? That was really
Yeah.
Logan. I didn't know anything about. I knew about the demon story, but I also knew somebody who'd also reported to me about it. But yeah, that person wants to remain anonymous. I can't divulge who that was.
Okay.
But I also know people that have other really famous were eyewitnesses to really famous UFO incidents as well. And it's just kind of a common culture where we don't discuss who they actually are unless we've got prior permission to say their name publicly. Even if they are a public figure, it's just kind of a courtesy to other folks.
Okay.
So I'll probably get a call from Lou Elizondo for mentioning his name, and he's going to be pissed.
Well, he's always seemed like a very reasonable guy. So
no, he'll be fine with it.
yeah. So I know I had been speaking with Logan about a week before you guys went on Rogan about the similarities between the Dover Demon and the Varginha Brazil creatures.
Yeah.
So what was I the mutual friend that he was referring to at that point?
Like a darker color, like it was almost like a purple, right?
Yeah, it was reddish purple or something like that. Yeah.
But they did have the black eyes and the large heads, and
they had horns though.
They had horns.
There was a very specific thing that they said.
The pictures that we're seeing for Varginha, this one had red eyes, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is because a friend of mine contacted me, a mutual friend that we talked about.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He was talking about something known as the Dover Demon, and it's over by Dover, Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
And there was supposed to be an incident where a UAP came down and there was a creature, and it looked a lot like the Varginha creature with the red eyes and whatever. So he was asking.
That's what the Varginha things look. Oh, that's the Dover Demon.
Yeah. That's the Dover.
That looks like a shoebill bird. That crazy bird.
Yeah, but he said it had bright red eyes. And
fun! Imagine that. Imagine running into that thing in the night.
Right.
Yeah.
So the question was,
never
glowing
sleep again.
eyes.
Never sleep again.
Yeah.
All I know is like I told Travis.
It does look a lot like the Varginha one, though.
Yeah.
That is. Go back to that last drawing you drew, Jamie. Or you pulled up rather. Now, if you can, will you pull up the image of the Varginha drawing? Because they had an artist who talked to the little girls that saw that, and those women, and the really look at it. Come on, man, that looks exactly the same.
Yeah, and there's those bumps on the head though.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see that. Maybe
That's exactly the same fucking thing, man.
Right.
Like literally exactly.
Yep.
So I told.
Crazy.
You could be that person. Yes.
Okay.
But I'm not going to out you if that's what you want me to do. If you want to out yourself, you can go right ahead.
Okay. For the record, it was me. I don't mind if you guys want to say my name publicly. You have my full permission at any point. So feel free. So going on Rogan, what is that process like?
That one, I feel very lucky to have done it because it was kind of a favor to James Fox when he was doing his film or developing his film, the program, and recommend everybody go see that. He did a really great job on that. Spent very long days. But anyway, while he was doing the film there, Joe Rogan, I think the testimony for Congress, where David Grush and Fravor and Graves were all giving their testimony, had just happened, and Joe wanted to get David Grush on his show. So James Fox knew about that, and James Fox had just been on Joe Rogan's show, I think a little bit beforehand, and he knew that I knew David Grush. So James said, well, I don't know how to get a hold of David Grush, but I know a guy who does. And so he called me, and then I called Joe Rogan, and that was back in 2023. And so I get to talking to Joe, and he's like, well, who the fuck are you? And I'm like, well, I'm one of the whistleblowers that talked to David Grush, and I heard you want to get a hold of him. So we got to know each other. We got to talk some stuff, and I got to shock him and all that good stuff. So he knew about me back in 2023. And he said, yeah, I'd like to have you on the show. But then I had all those legal wickets to go through that took me forever. And finally, I was ready to go public. I didn't think he wanted to talk to me anymore. But then he saw the program, the film that James Fox had already made, and I was in there. And he saw that I was in the film, and then he actually contacted me and said, yeah, I'd like to have you on the show now. So he was still interested, and we got to talking. We had a great time with that. Then he sent me an email from his travel folks, sent us all down there to go see him in Austin. And we had a really great time, me and Logan. And Joe pulls out the red carpet totally. I mean, everything, first class, luxury limos, you name it. He did everything. It was perfect. He's a really good host. So we had a really great time.
Awesome. Yeah. So, you get down to Austin. I know a lot of times he likes to take his guests to the comedy club that he runs, which coincidentally is called the Mothership. Did you get the opportunity to go to that?
No, Logan and I had a dinner with another friend of his. It's actually a really good guy to get to know. He's very highly technical in what he knows, and he's an experiencer. So we had a dinner with that person so I could come meet him. And no, we did not go to the comedy club because of that.
Okay. So post Rogan, what is the first thing you do when he says, "Okay, we're done recording"? Do you just kind of breathe a sigh of relief because you finally, are done with this huge podcast that that more than 20 million people around the world are going to see? What's going through your mind at that point?
Well, I didn't know how much it would impact me, but I quickly learned, after that show that my followers on X were going up exponentially, like 200, 300 a day or more some days. And that went on for like 2 weeks. And it still is, actually. And then, I've been asked for interviews. Shoot, if I don't put my phone down, it can actually ring off the wall all day long, constantly answering people's texts and messages and stuff like that. So, I try to answer as many people as I can, but man, it's getting to the point where I can see where public figures, they're just like, they have to prioritize it or have a team of people going through this stuff for them. I definitely see that now. I'm like, wow, because I went from just this guy, to Joe Rogan, poof, went through the ceiling on followers and everything. But it's been a good journey though. I mean, honestly, I'm getting in contact. It's expanding my network of experiencers and people that have really great voices in the community as well. Got to talk to Chris Bledsoe. I've gotten to talk to a lot of people about their experiences and stuff like that. So it's been actually a blessing. Everything's been a blessing. I don't really look at it as a sacrifice or a bad thing. I mean, yeah, sometimes the situation might have been bad here and there, but they don't they're not dragging down the rest of the good parts. They're not so bad that the good, I don't see the good anymore. I definitely see that actually there's more good out in it because I get a lot of support from people like yourself and other people in the community that are willing to, give me a shout out and say, hey, thank you, and all that good stuff. That means a lot to me.
Well, I think everyone should be supporting you and others like you. And I understand that you have created a fund for whistleblowers. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Last year, I just was discussing as an idea that I wanted to help other whistleblowers. I talked to some friends about it as well, and they said, "Yeah, it sounds like a good idea." So we set it up this year. Now it's ready to go. It's called First Hand Fund, but it's meant to take in donations so that we can help pay for, the trouble that comes with whistleblowing. Some like myself, I've been without a job for like 8 months now, and my clearance hasn't come back either. So I've been kind of hurt by this whole process. I know other people have been hurt worse than me and even suffered some physical threats as well. But yeah, there's other whistleblowers that may be wanting to come and say, yeah, I agree with you and the other whistleblowers, Jason. I want to come forward as well. How do I do this? But I got to give up my job. Well, what do you do for a guy like that? Well, if there's a fund for helping him transition, that will be a huge step up from what I had to go through because I've had to pay for everything out of my own pocket. I have very little left now because of what I've been through. And I don't want to see anybody else have to put up with that kind of crap. I mean, we're talking about people that are highly trusted, that have done a great job. And just because they see that there's been some fraud, waste, and abuse, they want to tell somebody about that. They should not be being attacked or messed with, have to lose their job, all these other difficulties that come along with it. And that's what that fund is going to be for. So if anybody out in the audience and your followers want to contribute, I'd appreciate it. That's what it's there for. I'll give you a link so you can share that out as well if you wish.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you like to just kind of say the link out loud for people who are more auditory, don't like looking for comments?
Yeah, I don't know the URL right off the top. Can I look at it real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let me see. Do you still see me?
You're hiding right now, but that's okay.
Okay.
We can just add in a screen capture of the website once I'm in the editing process.
Okay. It's coming up now. It's on wefunder.com. WEFUNDER, one word, .com. And then you just type in, I think when you're searching through there for firsthand, all one word, and it should come up with it, the fund, and it'll show you a little bit. But I'll screenshot it. Here you go. Hang on. Let's see if how do I send this to you?
You can just send it to me over the phone, and I'll just overlay it on later.
Okay. Well, I'll do that then. Let's just wait until later. Then I'll get that out to you.
Yeah, perfect. So now you're out here fighting for whistleblower rights,
Mm-hmm.
and I know pretty often in the public discord you hear everyone saying that whistleblowers need more protections, stuff like that. What specific protections would you say that whistleblowers are in need of that they currently don't have?
Well, there's certain things in the legislation that I think that should be provided for. If you become a whistleblower, whether you doing it at the ICIG, Arrow, or at Congress, what have you, that at least for me, the one thing that I wish I had suggested earlier on is that my clearance would not be messed with. So, in other words, if any whistleblower in the future, what I would say, if I were to pass new legislation that would protect them a little bit better, is if they're coming out of a cleared, or a special access program, that their clearance is put in a protected status at that point. In other words, you can't just wipe it out or not pass it along to somebody's job site so that they can go to work, which is what they're doing to me. That your classification or your clearance is kept in a nice safe place, and whether that's Congress or wherever, I don't know, but there needs to be literally a freeze put on while they're doing the investigation, so that I can still continue to work without being messed with. Because it seems like that's something that I've found out from other whistleblowers, that's one of their tactics, is to mess with your clearance. So that's one. Number two, I think, there needs to be some kind of compensation when, because when I traveled to even do my testimony to Congress, I had to spend like $2,000 of my own money to go fly in from Hawaii. And I did not get reimbursed for any of that. So I understood why Congress said they couldn't do that. And it's because they don't want to give the appearance that they're giving favor to a whistleblower, because, that's bad. It's kind of like asking somebody to come to the court case and you're paying them. It just doesn't look good. So there has to be some way to finance it, though. I mean, honestly, if they're calling you to testify, that should be kind of like a veteran going to a hospital, where you should have the mileage paid for in the hotel if it's out of state, kind of a thing. That's kind of one of the things they need to think about. And that way, it's not going to give any indication of impropriety or anything. At least then it'll just be a fund that is a flat rate for everybody. Kind of like giving you a per diem for the trip and paying for the
Yeah,
lodge.
'cause it's like for jury duty, you get paid per mileage, and for your actual time that you're spending there during the day. I think that it would be the least that our congressional offices could do is at
Yeah.
least pay for the travel and
Yeah, I'm
any
not asking for first class
sequestering.
travel. Yeah, I'm not asking for first class travel and luxury limousines everywhere. I'm just asking, help me pay for my tickets and the Ubers or whatever else I got to use to get around town just to get into DC, which is pretty bad on its own. Getting around in a car in DC is not that great in the middle of the week. So yeah, those are just some very simple things. I could probably think of a few more, but those are the ones that are on the top of my head that I wish that we could pass the new legislation with some of those. And I'm sure there's a lot of other things that are going to have to be developed into the new legislation that deal with the private industry partners that are part of this program. I think everybody would agree it's not appropriate, at least in our country, to have private companies, have possession of these technologies and not sharing any of the patents with anyone else. You're not allowed to monopolize that anywhere else other than this one program, or maybe a couple of other special access programs, and we can handle it. I mean, yeah, there's going to be a difference in the classified work they do, but there's other parts that can be public sector as well. And I think that's another thing they need to include in the legislation, is how they'd handle that.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense because I mean, for example, the nuclear bomb, the nuclear missile is not a classified thing on the umbrella level.
Mm-hmm.
We know that it's there, but they don't give out the instructions on how to build one.
No.
And I think that and I'm sure quite a few people would agree that, at least let us know that these technologies are there. We don't need to know how they work, but at least, just admit that, they're there. We don't know exactly where they're from in most cases, probably.
True.
But, it's not humans that are making it. It's a non-human intelligence.
Correct. And there's also, I think, if we ever get to disclosure, we're also going to, at some point in the down the line, is we're going to have to discuss how we're going to handle these retrievals a lot better, because we treat Russian downed aircraft better than we treat these NHI. And I think that's a complete travesty, that these NHI come to our world to do their research and whatever it is they do. And if they crash or we manage to grab one of them, they don't get treated very well. And that needs to stop. Definitely needs to stop. That's why I don't agree wholeheartedly with the military standpoint that all of these people are threats. No, they're not. My own personal experience has been that they're not. A lot of times there's a lot of love involved, a lot of care for us as human beings. Yeah, there's probably a few bad races, but I think the good ones outweigh them quite a lot, just like it is in society. There's a lot of good people, and it just seems to be the loudmouth bad people that seem to get a lot of the media attention. Um, just like the aliens now, the reptilians. Oh, now they're all a threat. No, it's not all of them. It's not. So we have to kind of get a grip on ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you mentioned that there were several different races that you've heard about. Um, can you kind of list them out for me?
The ones in the program were the tall whites and the grays, and a very small mention of the reptilians. Outside of the program, in my own life, I had what I think are Nordics. They had platinum hair, blue eyes, like I said, silver suits, and things like that. In some of the other interviews I did, I've mentioned them as well. But they were very godly feeling, I guess you'd say. I've had my own experience with what Chris Bledsoe would probably call the lady when I was a child, also. And I've also had a being that looked like a cherubim as a small child with my sister in the room, also. And that was when I was probably in first or second grade that occurred. But all of that was at Fort Devens mainly. And then the two times that we had the Nordics showed up in England when I was little. And then they showed up again when I was in San Jose, California. And both times my mother was there. So she can say that, yeah, they looked pretty strange, and they did disappear right after she turned for an instant, and they couldn't have possibly gone anywhere.
So was the pair that showed up in San Jose the same pair that was in England?
Yep. Exact same too. They didn't look like they had aged a day either.
And how long in between those two encounters?
Probably about 5 years.
Okay.
So
And was there anything else that you would associate with those encounters, such as do you remember if they had any scent to them, or if they left you with any kind of feelings or anything like that?
no, they were neither benign nor malevolent. They were just protective. I knew that they were there for my benefit and my mother's benefit, my family's benefit. Kind of like guardian angels, actually. That's what I would describe it as. They felt like guardian angels. That's what it was.
Okay. So kind of I know you were mentioning reptilians. You've mentioned that a few times before. Have you ever had any encounters with those?
I haven't. I remember distinctly having a very bad dream that was very vivid as a youth. But yeah, I remember in the dream I spoke Jesus Christ, and they disappeared, got slammed through a wall really hard. Um, who knows? Maybe it was a real experience, because other people have claimed the same thing. That saying the name of Jesus Christ in their presence is very bad for them for some reason. Um, Probably because they're so evil. I don't know. But that's the only thing I could say is reptilians. I think it was a dream, but a very vivid one. So I've been told, stay away from dreams type things because it gets me in trouble, obviously. But anyway, that's the only thing I could say about reptilians. But no, I've not had anything where I would actually say that, yeah, I saw one actually doing this or doing that in my room. I do have only that one vivid dream that could have been real, but I'd probably have hypnotic regression to remember everything that happened if that was the case.
Yeah. So, do you remember if you had seen or had an encounter with any UFOs, UOP at the kind of same time frame as that?
Um, Not that I recall. I remember, well, since I'm writing my book, I am trying to do some research around the time frames that I had these incidents. And yes, there appears to have been a flap in that area of England where I was for the first encounter. And then in San Jose, yeah, it's probably around the same time frame that I saw that UFO in San Jose, that I saw them again. So,
Okay.
yeah, there's probably some connection there.
Yeah, I would definitely. I mean, at the very least, it is a coincidence or synchronicity, however you want to call it.
Hmm. Apparently, Fort Devens has a lot of strangeness that happens there as well, and that's where I've had 1, 2, 3 encounters. So, yeah, that was where I met the lady, by the way.
Okay, so take me through that encounter.
That one, I got up early on the weekend, and I usually would, just find something to do because my parents would get up after me, and so did my sister. I was just an early riser. Anyway, I'd love to go looking for crawdads in the stream across the street, and looking at water striders and picking up, nice shiny stones and stuff like that. So I did that, and I'd go down the bottom of the hill with where the stream would flow down to, and then it would turn right and end at a wire fence. Right, the stream would go beyond the wire fence, but I couldn't get past the wire fence. So I'm crawdadding, and I hit the turn, and I go and I keep crawdadding until I thought where I figured the wire fence should be. And I was like, "Gosh, I've been looking for crawdads for a while. I've been going for quite a while. I should have hit the fence by now." So I stand up, look around. There's no fence. Matter of fact, there's no buildings. All I can see is this sea of grass all around me, and it's rimmed by these beautiful trees all around. And then I get scared. I'm like, "Oh crap, I'm lost. What happened? I must have ended up in the wrong spot or something." And then I turn around, and there's this very tall, blonde, beautiful looking woman uh, towering over me and looking down at me. And she says, "Are you scared, Jason?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm scared. I can't find my way home, you know." And she's like, "Oh, don't worry." She said, just put your head down and follow the stream back. And oh, by the way, listen for a bell. And I was like, "Okay, I'm listening," because I was like, "Thank goodness," and "Thank you, lady," and I turned around to thank her as I'm, going down the stream. I'm thinking, "Oh, I didn't say thank you," so I turned around and she's gone. Uh, so anyway, I continue on, and sure enough, I start to hear a bell, and I keep following the stream, and then I finally look up, and kind of like the scene changed all of a sudden from that sea of grass and trees. I started seeing the buildings again, but it was very kind of sudden. And then I was like running towards the street corner, and looked behind me, and sure enough, there's the fence again. And I ended up going home. I got back to my mother, and everybody were gone when I got home. The whole house was empty. And so I went upstairs and noticed my mother had started laundry. And I love laying on my blanket right out of the dryer, which I had uh, pulled out of the hamper, or not out of the hamper, but out of the laundry basket. And I just laid down and went to sleep. I didn't know where everybody had went. And then there was all this noise and racket and everything, and people coming and going downstairs. And then my mother finds me sleeping on my blanket. And I'm like, what's going on? She's like, oh, thank God you're here. You're here. I can't believe it. And she's like screaming downstairs to somebody about, he's here. He's right here. And all these cops and everybody come marching up the stairs. Where were you? You've been gone for hours. I'm like, really? I only felt like, 20 minutes, maybe, 30 minutes tops. And they're like, no, you've been gone for hours. And I'm like, holy shit, what happened to me? So some kind of time passed weird during that experience as well. Because my mom will tell you that too. Because she said she got up, she made some breakfast and put it on the table, started the laundry, expected me to come in like I normally did out of playing and come eat my breakfast. And then when she got so far with the laundry, she's like, oh, well, Jason's late. Then she got far with the laundry and she started to worry. And that's when she called the cops, I guess, because she was like looking around at all the normal places. I wasn't anywhere to be found. So she said that happened. And when the cops got called, they all came out. My dad had some friends and neighbors all started looking for me. She said they've been looking for me for like 2 to 3 hours or something like that, maybe even 4. She says it was a very long time. And then all of a sudden, here I am showing up in the laundry. So I'm like, oh, sorry. I just went crawdadding. I just went crawdadding.
So, is that the only time you've experienced missing time?
No, I've had experienced missing time in the desert. Because at lunchtime, I remember having a distinct feeling to go out and eat my lunch outside, even though it was cold. So I imagine that was him, the pilot, again, telepathically telling me he wanted me to come out of the schoolhouse. I remember having my lunch with me, and when I came back, I didn't have it. I don't know what happened in between the time I exited and the time I came back. I got no memory of where the hell I went. Or where my lunch went either, for that matter. There was another missing time when I was in England, when I was stationed at RAF Mildenhall. I was driving to work one morning in February, and it's very dark at that time. It's winter time, not a lot of daylight hours. And usually at that time of year, it's a 45-minute drive for me to get to work, and it took a good 30 minutes into the drive to start seeing the sun come up. So I'm driving down the road from my house, and it goes down and back up. And as I get to the top of the next little gentle rolling hill, it's got farmers' fields on both sides. The entire place lights up like daylight, but it's a green gold color. And I could tell that the source is coming from my left. And so I look to my left, and there's this like 30 or 40 foot diameter orb just hanging there over this farmer's field just to my left. And it's glowing, and it's even so bright that I look up at the clouds. It's illuminating the clouds above it as well. So it's giving off a huge amount of light. And then the next thing I know is I'm still in the car. I can still see the light from the orb, but it's daylight now. The sun is fully up. I can see it in the mirror. It's already up. And I'm like, holy shit, what just happened? I shouldn't be seeing sunshine for another 20 minutes or more. So I get this distinct telepathic feeling too, because it reminded me of my feeling I got with the telepathy with the guy in the desert. And it told me, go to work, we're done talking. And at that point, I realized something cold was on my cheek, and I reached up and wiped it, and I'm like, I'm crying. Holy crap, why am I crying? So when I woke up and I was continuing to drive, whatever happened in that missing time, that 20 minutes or so with this orb hanging out, something had hit me emotionally to where I was crying when I came to. So that's the other missing timepiece that I have no idea what happened.
Okay.
So I've had about 3 occurrences.
Yeah, which I think that's a lot more than average.
Well, they say that it follows you around in your family a lot of times, and also Native Americans, they say it's in their blood or it's in their culture about star people. and the Star Nation. I'm both. I'm both an American Indian or Native American, and I'm also somebody that has this happening all throughout my life. So I got a double whammy there, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it's both a blessing and possibly a mild curse. I mean, depending on how you look at it.
I don't look at it as a curse. I look at it as a blessing all the time. I mean, honestly, I feel like I learned from it as much as I learned from life because, at least that encounter in the desert left me with that feeling of civility and love that I should have for everybody around me. And I wish everybody could feel that and find some kind of motivation to be kind to others all the time and just be cognizant all the time that you must be in control of your own thoughts. I think that's really where it set me on that path. So I think it's a blessing overall.
Okay. So how did that mindset, that feeling, how did that influence you raising your six kids?
Um, it was both good and bad because, I wished for them many things. I understood the world a certain way, and I think that's where I still am weak, is I need to understand other people's way of seeing life. And each of my kids have a different, character, personality. And yeah, sometimes there were clashes and stuff like that. But overall, I tried my best to be a great dad to them, and that they had a safe place, and they knew they could talk to me, that I'd help them no matter what, that they could always come home if they didn't make it in life. Um, but I also gave them the room to become themselves, and encourage them to have their own uh, value systems, and all that kind of good stuff. I didn't never push that off on them, but I always was there for them as much as I could be, showing up to their courses and their concerts and everything else, at the school. I tried to do all that as much as I could. Um, but yeah, there was a lot of missing time, or not missing time, but there was a lot of sacrificial time being in the military as well. So they had to deal with dad not just not having time, but I wasn't even there sometimes. I was out deployed somewhere. So I can never take that back because I find now that that I'm out of the military, you make time for what's important. You got to do that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've never had the pleasure of serving myself, but I can definitely see how important it would be to make time for family and for the things that you love to do on your own personal level.
Yeah, I agree. Hey,
So,
well, go ahead.
um, what would you say is kind of your favorite hobbies?
Well, I play guitar a lot nowadays. I do draw from time to time when I'm inspired by something. Draw. Same thing with poetry and writing lyrics to the music that I come up with. I have to kind of be inspired though. Again, so it's not something I do like consistently. Um, I like hanging out with my friends, my neighbors. I really love animals, so getting out in nature is really good for me. Um, Hiking. Uh, I do get into some video games, but not a lot. Um, mainly go for strategy games. First person shooters suck. That kind of thing. My boy got me out of wanting to play any first person shooter because of all the times he's thrown his controller across the room and cursed
Yeah.
bloody murder for dying too many times. And I'm like, that's not for me. That doesn't look like entertainment. So anyway, I haven't done much of that, but I'll play a strategy game. Um, and I do like to, listen to folks. I'm really starting to get into that now, where I have a lot of some people that just want to talk to me. They don't want to talk to anybody else, but they trust me because they've gotten to know me over time. And I'm really finding that those are really precious moments when they're opening up, and I'm learning something new, or I can have advice for them because I know about something that maybe they didn't figure out during their encounter, and maybe it helps them along with it because some of them do have some trauma, involved in some of it. But yeah, that's another thing that I'm really starting to get into is just answering some of the messages and the calls that I get that I find really precious, So I'm starting to get into that more, and actually, I haven't gotten into doing my guitar as much this past month because of after Joe Rogan, I've had a lot more of that interaction. So I'm really getting into talking to folks, I guess.
Okay. One question I like to ask everybody that I have on is kind of what is your favorite food, your favorite meal?
Hands down, lobster.
Lobster.
Yep,
How do
lobster.
you serve it?
I
Just
like
like
it.
a slice of lemon and some butter, or just
I
straight from
like.
the claw?
Well, I like it steamed, and I like it with some butter, but I don't usually put lemon on it. No.
Okay.
But yeah, that's
Yeah.
my favorite meal.
And how about dessert? What's your kind of guilty pleasure dessert?
Yeah, it's kind of a toss up. It would be a toss up between pecan pie and chocolate mousse. What do they call that? Boston cream pie.
Oh, oh, yeah, that's excellent choice, sir.
Yeah, I can only do that in the holidays, and then I don't touch it because it's very fattening, and I'm trying to lose weight.
Well, from the first time that I've seen you to now, it definitely looks like it's been paying off.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
mean,
I mean, that means a lot to me. I have been trying to do my best with it. It's been a long journey, but I've still got about another. I want to get down to 220, so I've got about another 50 pounds to lose.
well, I think it's just a matter of time, and you'll definitely hit that goal.
Thank you. Very
Um,
encouraging.
yeah, anytime. Um, so I guess to kind of end off here, because we're coming up on almost 2 hours here.
Hmm.
Um, kind of we haven't really gotten into it, but let's get into your main story, which is the desert encounter.
Yep. So that was a day where we were going up to do the training for the air crews for the day. The air crews being pilots from all over the world. They come up there to the Nellis Test Range because it's got a nice big area to fly around in and dogfight. Um, that's another reason why we're up there at Black Mountain is to train them in surviving in a wartime environment where things aren't so nice and they still have to get bombs on target. So anyway, we were in Beatty, the hotel, the Burro Inn in Beatty, Nevada. That's where we were. That's where we always stayed. It was in the Burro Inn Hotel. So we took off from there in a convoy of about 3 or 4 cars, about 3 people per vehicle. Maybe there were 4 people in my car, maybe 2 or 3 in the other cars. So we all take off, and we get up to the gate and then to the cantonment area where you could gas up your vehicle or change out your tires if you needed to, and do some minor maintenance on your car if that's what you needed. And in that same cantonment area, they have these huts where the video operators operate, and they're the ones who recorded the UFO from the previous week. And that's you can see that online. That video has been leaked since 1994. But if you look it up as the Nellis Test Range UFO encounter or UFO of 1994, it should pop right up. And along with that, there'll be a report that some people put in there. There'll be a picture of Black Mountain where I was working and all that stuff. So you'll at least get to see how this UFO came in and the previous week. And then the following week, I have my encounter with the pilot. So he'd apparently been there the entire weekend or something. And that's probably why his craft was still broken and everything. Anyway, so we get out of the video, or we go up and we see the video operators. They wanted us to write down our names and say, yeah, we saw the video. No, I was not here last week. And I think those were the 2 things they wanted listed on that sheet of paper. And then as I'm exiting the hut, this lady that had been sitting there against the wall, she kind of stops me and pulls me to the side and says, "There's somebody on the range. You don't talk to him. Don't talk to him." She looked very upset, and I'm just thinking, okay, thank you, thank you, lady. I'll see you later. So I got in. We all get in the cars. We all start taking off, and we're headed towards Quartz Mountain. At that point, there's about a mile or so of driving between the Cantonment area to our turn that is near Quartz Mountain. So about halfway through that drive on that part of the dirt roads, there's this strange-looking craft, which is the craft from the video that I just told you about, is sitting there, and I'm thinking, man, that is the weirdest looking thing I've ever seen. And you're talking about a guy who has seen literally hundreds, if not thousands, of aircraft, and has to know how to identify them so I don't, mess up when I'm training these people. So this looked nothing like anything I'd ever seen, including it being in the program as well. I was like, I've never seen anything that looks like this. So, and then there's this individual running towards us, trying to flag us down, looking like he was in trouble. But when he was running, he ran really funny, like he was going to fall over at any moment. And he also looked like, he was running against a very strong wind, like a hurricane or something. And I was thinking, what's up with that? And then as I got closer, or we drove closer to him, I could see he had very pale skin, like an albino, but it had this blue undertone, like he was going hyperthermic. So I thought he was freezing to death. So I start telling the driver, we got to pull over. This guy's in trouble. He looks hypothermic to me. So he's like, all right. And I'm starting to get my jacket off, thinking I'm going to render aid to this guy. And then the guy in the front seat next to the driver says, he's got no ears, as we get closer. And I'm thinking, good grief, dude, your mouth. Honestly, this guy's probably dying and you're talking about his ears, So I'm still getting my jacket off, trying to get out the door. And then I put my foot onto the dirt road, close the door, look up, and he's got no freaking ears. His eyes are twice as big. And he's wearing a military uniform, of all things. And I'm thinking, what on earth have I gotten myself into? What on earth is going on here? And the next thing I know, he's talking to me both verbally and telepathically. And he's not talking English at all, but I'm understanding absolutely everything he's telling me. He's telling me he needs to repair his craft. It's broken. He needs tantalum to fix it. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. Is it titanium? He's like, no. I'm like, well, go talk to Dreamland. He's like, screw those guys. They're barbarians and murderers. I'm never going to talk to them guys. And then I'm like, well, I take classes in college. I've got a geophysics professor. Maybe he knows a metallurgist. And then without even saying goodbye, he turns and goes back to his craft, gets in it. I turn and, and then I turn and I see that the people in the car with me are all in a trance, and they're coming out of it as he gets up into the air and starts flying off. So they probably didn't even remember what had just occurred. So that's probably how that all rolled out. But anyway, the other thing that I thought would be kind of humorous for your followers and your listeners is I did manage to get my liner to my jacket, not the outer part of the garment, but there's an outer part and an inner part that buttons in. I took out the inner part, and I managed to give that to him during the conversation because I was freezing my butt off. And he kind of refused, but I was being adamant. I'm like, no, you're going to take the damn jacket. It's cold, or take my jacket liner. And he graciously took it. So I have no idea where the jacket is. And people are always like, oh, yeah, it's probably flying around your anus, so. But so, yeah, I did exchange my jacket liner with him. So that's another little funny tidbit of information that people might want to laugh at or whatever. But I was just concerned for him that he was very cold, just like I was, because it was windy. It was wintertime. It was October. In the desert, it gets really wicked cold out there. So I knew he couldn't have been having a fun time. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I know I definitely wouldn't.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how everything panned out for that. I was then I got in the car. Nobody seemed to be wanting to talk about it. We had to get the systems set up in Black Mountain for the training and everything. So we were kind of in a rush at that point. So we all took off and got to Black Mountain as soon as we could, set things up. And then, like I said, at lunchtime, I've got that little bit of missing time where I don't know what happened to my lunch and all that other good stuff. So I think I maybe met him again, but I don't know the context of the whole meeting.
Okay. So the craft that you saw, describe it as best you can for me.
It was kind of round like a Huey helicopter, the type that has a big bubble kind of looking deal on the front. But at the back, it had this round black sort of oval egg-shaped pancake that was sticking out where the tail should have been if it was a helicopter. So it had the pancake was the tail, the cockpit was the rounded bubble shape at the front, and then on the sides, instead of having skids under the canopy, it had horns that went from the very top of the craft all the way to the bottom, and that on the very tips of the horns of these kind of ram's horns, that's what was resting on the desert floor, kind of like skids would on a helicopter. But there were no propellers, there was no engines as far as I could tell. But you'll see a perfect rendition of that and a drawing if you look up on the internet that Nellis Test Range UFO of 1994. It'll also have a really good depiction of what it looks like.
Okay, and I was actually going through your Twitter feed and found the 3D rendering that somebody did to represent that. So I'll be sure to kind of add that onto the screen
Yeah.
in post. And
Yeah. I was really surprised to see that come out. I was like, this is perfect because this looks exactly like what I saw. The only thing it didn't show was how the canopy opened up when he got in.
yeah. So was there any noise associated with the canopy, like opening or closing?
Not that part, but when he took off, yes, there was definitely a sound like it was very high pitched and kind of like either like if you've heard your fan belt squealing in your car, or there's a bad bearing somewhere and it's squeaking, but it was very quick. It wasn't like there was like nothing and then all of a sudden a squeak. This was like one squeak after another, like really quick. You could tell, and I thought that was part of the reason he needed to repair it, is because it was making that sound, that something was not right with that sound. It didn't sound proper because you're talking to a guy who also has mechanical knowledge of listening to aircraft and things. When I was doing all the airframe repair, you kind of learn what the hum of an engine should look like or sound like, and what it shouldn't sound like. This one sounded like something was wrong, to me, at least, in my estimation. So that was the only sound it made.
Okay. And then I know in the past you've kind of gone back and forth on the material that this thing was looking for.
Yep.
This guy was looking for. On Joe Rogan, you were saying tritium. You've also said tantalum.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's kind of the imbalance there between those two words, just kind of because it
I don't
happened
know.
so long ago,
Well, it's kind of like
or
me mentioning a word, or like I say something medically to you about, I take cyclobenzaprine and all this other stuff, and you'd be like, okay. And then later on, you're like, well, what medicine's Jason taking? Some kind of benzocyclocrapula, whatever it is, that's kind of how I stumbled through all of that. But since then, I've got plenty of critical-minded folks talking to me, but some scientists actually were helpful, and they said, Jay, you should just stick with one, and the one that we think is tintium, because that is a byproduct of nuclear fission, and that sounds more appropriate for what application might have been needed for this repair. that he was talking to you about. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll try to stick with that. So from this day forward and from yesterday forward, I'm using the term tintium instead of tritium or tantalum or tarantulas or whatever else comes out of my mouth. Okay. But I'm going with tintium. Okay. And that's it.
Absolutely. So I think at that point that's all we've really got time for today, but I would love to have you back on at a future time if you'd be willing.
Yep. Sure. I'm always game for a good discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just talk a little bit after the stream ends, and anyway, thank you for coming on, and look forward to having you again.
Yeah. We're going to have to come up with a good nickname for you too, like Double D, since you're the Dover Demon guy now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So I'll refer to you as Double D for now.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Jay.
All right. Thank you for inviting me. I had a great time.
Absolutely. Bye. Thank you guys for watching and or listening. As always, I will include links to Jason's social media in the description, as well as a link to the First Hand Fund, which I think is an incredible thing that he's doing. So if you're able to, please support it. As always, until next time, look forward to seeing you.